Hi, this is Judith Pentz. I am so excited. I have got a guest today, and we are going to talk about the science of light and the science of life. Alexia Neonakis and I have known each other for a long time. She used to live here in Albuquerque, but now she lives in the Hudson Valley. But I have a couple of announcements before we begin our conversation today. First and foremost, my book is actually being released today, Cleanse Your Body, Reveal Your Soul. You can go to Amazon.com. I actually have an author page where you can actually select it. Bookworks may have it as well as there's one other one, but I'm not remembering it at this point in time. The second announcement that I wanted to make was that I do have my the other website to consider is Bookshop and Waterstones and Target. They all have the book available for sale. I have my first Bookworks book talk, and that will be virtual on September 10th. It'll be 6 p.m. Mountain Time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Please join me then. We'll send out announcements for that as well. So excited to have you here, Alexia. How are you today?
I'm doing all right. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here, especially on your special day of launching your book.
Oh, thank you. I wanted to really mention a little bit about the book before we talk more, but I wanted to really speak to why I wrote the book and how Ayurveda came into my life. And I'm asking you to also share after I mention a few points here. I wrote this book because I was really looking for something that would help sustain my well-being as well as the different clients that I've worked with over the years. And I changed the way I began to work, becoming more integrative in my approach as a psychiatrist. I found Ayurveda for myself being very helpful and supportive in so many ways. And I wanted to see if there's ways to incorporate it and bring it back into the Western lifestyle. Though my book is based on a trip to India that I took, many of the things that I speak about is something that people can actually do here in the US. And one of the things that I learned about was this ancient cleanse called Panchakarma. It is a life-changing detoxification as well as a rejuvenation therapy. And I found that it really helped me in changing who I am at the cellular level. And my book itself has lots of tidbits that helps you to look at what's possible with regards to the self-care, as well as micro-disciplines that really support you as well. My aim is to help create resilience for people so that they feel supported and learn that these are tools that they can use in their everyday life. So having said that, let me hear a little bit about what brought you to Ayurveda and then ultimately to the science of light in terms of Vedic astrology.
Well, actually, for me, it was the other way around. I started off with the astrology, and I remember asking about the stars and the signs when I was in third grade. So this is something that I've really been drawn to since I was really little. And so I started studying astrology when I was about 12. After finding a book that was totally tattered, masking tape on the binding, just the cover was missing. It was just, I looked at it and I was like, this is gold. And I opened it up and it was an ephemeris, which is actually the placement of the planets in the sky and what constellations they're in. And at that point, that's basically all I did was do charts, draw them up on my own, do everyone's charts I knew, read every astrology book I can get my hands on. And so that's something that for me, the astrology was my entry into the whole Vedic world. And it started off with Western astrology. When I was about 25 or so, I started having these feelings that I needed more from the readings, from the charts that I was looking at, that I wanted to know, like, why this karma, why this chart, this lifetime. And, a friend of mine actually told me about a reading that he had with an astrologer. And the things that he said, I was like, this isn't Western astrology. What is this? And he told me it was Vedic astrology. And I was like, what? I got to find this out. So I made an appointment with this person. And during the session, he kept saying over and over, I'll teach you. And what's funny is sometimes when you're in a reading, you don't hear everything that the person is saying until you hear the recording or until even years later when it's ready to hear it. And I heard the recording and was like, oh my gosh, so I called him up and I started studying with him. That was about 22 years ago. So I've had other teachers in between and done a ton of studying on my own and thousands of charts. So, in the process of the astrology, I've always been interested in health and healing and holistic foods. I even had a catering company in New York City, so I love to cook. And while I was studying at NYU, I discovered yoga as well when I was about 20. So all of these systems started to sort of come together for me personally. When I was about 30, 31 or so, I took a trip to India by myself. And my thought was I was going to do yoga there, but I ended up having a mini panchakarma, which was completely life-changing. I received darshan with a Hindu priest that also said things that I was like, okay, this is my path. I knew it was my path to be in the Vedic sciences, and it just really confirmed it for me. So I had a really life-changing trip in 2005. Came back to New York, told the people I was working with and said, I need to go study this. A few months later, I applied to the Ayurvedic Institute in Albuquerque with Dr. Ladd and moved. Packed up my apartment in New York City and moved out west to study this.
And that's where I met you, was when you were here and you were actually giving readings, or actually you were doing teachings at the Annapurna restaurant here in town in Albuquerque that has a Ayurvedic flavor to it. It's more vegetarian than true Ayurvedic throughout the menu, but has many aspects to it. It's interesting that you went to India in 2005. My first time going was 2006.
Oh, okay.
And I had been invited by the family that the Joshi family, and they actually have a home here in Albuquerque, but also one in Nagpur. And Dr. Joshi was celebrating his birthday. I ended up being invited to their trip to celebrate his birthday that they were taking through Rajasthan.
Oh, wow.
And it was, exactly. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That was a life-changing trip in and of itself that I won't go into the details, but it was actually a very, an amazing experience for me in many ways. And but I do need to mention that was the second trip I went to India. The first time was 2006 on my own as well. And that was life-changing in terms of letting the India and its energy impact me rather than me trying to push the river, because there were so many things that happened. And I also was exposed to Panchakarma there as well, and really was drawn to it. Came back and reconnected with the Joshis because I had known them briefly, and then began the deeper dive with Panchakarma here locally. And then decided to go to India to do it because I found that I needed that time away from work and from life here to really do the deep dive that is needed for a true, deep, and authentic cleanse. So
yes, absolutely.
And for me, I'd always had interest in terms of alternative or integrative approaches for my own healthcare. And I realized probably in the early 2000s that I needed to bring more of that into the practice of who I was working with, the different people. I work with kids, I work with adults, and really saw a need to address a more of a holistic perspective, bringing lifestyle, nutrition, all that stuff. And I found bringing Ayurveda into my life that it helps strengthen my commitment in that direction, to really support my own health and well-being. I wanted to mention this time being so important because we are in the middle of this pandemic, and it's so fraught with challenges, be it the politics, the science, and the tugging between the two, and wanted to hear your perspective on the power of Ayurveda and how you're utilizing the knowledge you have with Vedic astrology to support people's health and well-being. I wanted to talk about maybe a lifestyle management and a few other things too.
So, like I said, I my starting point is always looking at the charts, right, and seeing what's going on in the sky, and looking then also at how are the doshas, how are the Ayurvedic principles showing up for all of us, and how then can we interact with these energetics that are at play. And so what's been happening for all of us is, from an Ayurvedic perspective, there's very high vata in the sky. So vata in Ayurvedic terms is connected to ether and air elements. And so there's no container, right? So right away, ether and air elements are very swirling in the atmosphere. Scattered, dispersing, also very creative, also very innovative, also very erratic, right? Out of the blue, out of left field kind of thing, because they'll do one thing one minute, one thing another minute. And so that's more Rahu, the north node of the moon energetic that I'm talking about too, which is very, very prominent in this whole time period and influencing a tremendous amount of things that we're experiencing. So just right away, when I saw that, I was like, whoa, we all need vata pacifying modalities and practices to help us manage this time. And so if we think of the qualities of vata, it's cold, dry, light, subtle, mobile, clear, right? And so these are the elements, these are the qualities that are up in our energy field right now. And so in Ayurveda, what we do is we balance with opposites. And so we look at those qualities and we say, okay, if cold is up, obviously not right now in the summer, but if cold is up, what do? We counter it with warm or hot, right? If dry is up, we counter it with oily. And this is the way we sort of balance out the energetics. It's very simple and makes a lot of sense, but it also sometimes just takes understanding this very beautiful language of Ayurveda and how we can look at what's happening out there and how we can balance it out within our own lives.
Right.
So that we are more productive and more grounded and not, freaking out. Like so many people just immediately go from 0 to 60. It can be very unsettling right now. And so having some simple practices like we can discuss will help people to stay more grounded. And in Ayurvedic terms, we say swastha, situated in the self, right? Really rooted internally, not just in your physical health, but mind, body, soul, and emotions.
It's important that you're bringing that up because I think in the American culture, we're very good at doing something physical to, quote, work it out and to, quote, be present, whatever. But there's so many other layers of attention that's required. We are mind, body, spirit, and each layer actually needs some attention for that calming benefit to happen to the whole being.
Yes.
So I know for myself, I actually skipped an oleation day just about a week ago because I needed a new water heater, and I got tired of taking cold showers. I'm not doing the oleation today, right? Well, I actually noticed it later in the day.
Wow.
And made a point of doing it, at some point, and then went to visit my daughter, who fortunately doesn't live too far away, and I could borrow the shower. But, that's a simple tool that I personally start out with every day to work on allowing myself to be calmer. It impacts the nervous system. It nurtures the skin. And in the summertime, I tend to do a blend that has coconut with less sesame and more sesame and less coconut for the winter. And that really helps to support me.
One thing about that I always love to tell my clients who, when they start what I always call is the Ayurvedic oil massage, right? Where you oil yourself up head to toe everywhere, in your ears, everywhere, right? And the word for oil in Sanskrit is sneha.
Sneha?
And sneha also means love. So there's this beautiful idea when you oil yourself up that you're really coating yourself with this layer of love that you can then go into your day. And I know all of my clients, I know you found it to be life-changing. I find it to be life-changing. It's one of the very first things you do to a newborn baby.
Right.
Actually, right? Is oil them up and support their skin, because the skin and the nervous system are made up of the same tissue in utero. So when you touch the skin and you oil the skin and help ground it with the oil, right? Which is very nicely grounding, especially for vata, which we all have in our lives right now because of how overextended we are. Remember, vata doesn't have a container. So the oil helps to remind you, like, come back home, right? Get grounded in the core.
Right.
So it's massively life-changing, and it's incredible. It's such a beautiful practice of self-care, right? And taking time. How many people have time for themselves? Taking a few minutes before you shower or bathe is really important to just take a few minutes for yourself. It can really change your entire day.
Right. And I really, I emphasize that part too, that you just mentioned in terms of the love and nurturing yourself and allowing it to be present, you know, and it's as important as the words that you would say, you know,
Exactly.
myself.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk also a little bit about yoga. I've been a yoga practitioner now going on 20 years, it turns out. I discovered it in New Zealand, of all places.
Oh, great.
And I ended up studying with the first certified Iyengar practitioner there, who was like a military, you know, sergeant type guy. And we practiced on cold tile, and we did have a mat at least. But when I came back to the US, I was like, my gosh, it's luxury compared to what I went through there, right? And there's no heat in the room, right, except for this wooden stove in the middle. So for me, yoga has been life-changing. And when I speak to my clients, the patients that I've worked with over the years, I ask them to pick, you know, something like Tai Chi or Qigong or yoga because of the mind-body connection that happens naturally with these particular disciplines. And for me, when I go to the gym more and more, I tend to just go to maybe some classes that help support my well-being in that way. And I try to be, and the whole point of yoga is that you're present and grounded and learn how to be with your body in a whole new way, rather than doing mindless exercise, which I see happen time and time again in the gym setting. You can do mindless exercise at home too, but I'm just saying the beauty of these traditions are something that people really need to consider to help further ground themselves and settle themselves.
Well, the word yoga means to yoke, and it means union, right? So it's all about the unification of the breath in the body. And so moving through these asanas, these postures, with the breath being the number one thing, right? I always think as yoga as preparing us for meditation and spiritual practice. And I always say to my clients, like, you got to get your wiggles out, right? You got to like open up the channels. You got to move, get stretched, and get things opened up, but also open up those subtle channels so that when you do finish and you are in shavasana, in laying down on the ground, or you're sitting in meditation, that you don't have anything else, you know, on your mind, where you've moved through some of the, you know, the physical challenges of the day or the mental, emotional challenges of the day, and you can actually sit and be present.
Right.
Really beautiful. Also, you know, in Ayurveda, the seat of Vata is the pelvis, among other things, right? That is one of the main seats of Vata. And so right now, during this time especially, it's really important to do grounding, rooting postures, that you're connecting with the pelvis, you're connecting with the thighs. That's another seat of Vata, right? Anything where you're on the ground. So these are all things that even if you don't know how to do a yoga pose, something where you're on the ground and you're bending forward in your pelvis, you're activating that whole center of Vata, will bring back the energy there and bring the attention and awareness there, and breathing into your pelvis, right? Just really directing the breath down is going to be grounding and calming to Vata for sure, which is high for all of us.
Right. And that, you know, at this time, especially with the Vata being so high, the energy, you know, the anxiety is another word to think about.
Exactly.
The Vata. Doing these grounding yoga postures are really helpful. I just wanted to mention that in my readings along through the years, I came across this piece of information that I have, I think, included in my book, that the Buddha was actually taught Hatha yoga and could only, once he had completed and learned sufficient amount, only then was he allowed to learn meditation. So yeah. And so if it took him for a while to get to that point, it's something, you know, to consider when you do the postures, then to think about meditation, which again, we can talk a few minutes about the power of breath and the power of meditation. Two other tools that are very useful during this time of high anxiety, high Vata energy.
Absolutely. Well, the breath work, I think, is huge, right? Again, ether and air qualities. Ether is the space, so your nostrils, right? And the air qualities. And so even when, I know when I did a Vipassana retreat, you focus on your breath, right? You focus on your breath. That's one of the ways that even if you've never meditated, you can just focus on the breath going into the body right? And the breath coming out of the body, and just really ground that. And as your thoughts travel, come back to the breath. Just constantly come back to the breath, because the breath is in the now, right? That is the only thing that is rooting us into the center of our beings and into the now.
Right. Actually, you're bringing up an excellent point. And we'll respond to Amelia's question here shortly. The now, the present, is all that we have. Yeah. And the more we can be present, the calmer we can actually feel, because the past we have no control of, and the future we don't either. And all that really exists is this moment. Yeah. So the more you can be present, and all the different tools we've talked about up to this point allow for that to be the case. So we have a question from Amelia. She says, she asks, do you find doing yoga in the morning, afternoon, and evening make a difference, or is there a difference? So for me, it depends on what kind of yoga you're doing. If you're doing a really energetic type yoga, oftentimes that's recommended earlier in the day as opposed to later in the day. And that includes breath work too. There are different types of breath work that are very energizing. And typically those are done earlier in the morning rather than later in the day. And you also need to know about your own body type and your own constitution in terms of how you relate to your day. For myself, I find that if I do yoga in the morning, I'm better off during the day. But sometimes I've gone to evening classes and I've been equally happy. But and there's so many different styles of yoga. So it depends on what your intention is as to what kind of yoga you want to do. For example, restorative yoga, you can do anytime, but it's wonderful to do later in the day if you have trouble sleeping, because it calms the nervous system so immensely.
There's also, just to add to that, in Ayurveda, we talk a lot about the dinacharya, and the dinacharya is your daily routine. And it's oftentimes rooted in the morning practices where you wake up and you take time for you. Right. Which, again, this many of us, especially for busy caretakers, right, and working people, you have to carve out that time for yourself. And so waking up in the morning, doing your yoga, doing your pranayama, your breath work, doing some meditation, getting the oil on, and bathing, right? These are all things that can set you up for a really solid day for yourself, where you feel like, okay, I had some time for myself. Like, I can encounter anything that's coming towards me today. So if you're able to, that would be great. And then also, I think, like what Judith was saying, like, you have to see how you feel too, right? Because Ayurveda is for whom and when. And so you have to really tune into yourself and how you feel in those moments. Yeah. Right.
Important. So all these things that we've talked about, I just wanted to, really point out that it's about how to be kinder to yourself and how to nurture yourself. And as Ayurveda and, Patanjali has spoken about this, who's wrote the Yoga Sutras and many of the aspects of yoga, Ayurveda, and in terms of the meditation practices, pranayama, the whole idea is to calm the mind. If the mind is calmer, the senses are calmer. If the senses are calmer, so is the body. And who wouldn't want that?
Yeah. And, with Jyotish, with Vedic astrology, it is the eyes of the Vedas, and it is for calming the mind. And so sometimes it's helpful to know what's going on. So you can really say, okay, I don't have to have this anxiety anymore, because I know why, when, and how to engage in this, right? So this is where I find it so helpful just to know, even if it's just as simple as knowing in the sky, Vata is high, and these are the tools, right?
Right. Yeah. I want to mention that, and then in the few minutes we have left, and won't do it justice, is talk about the power of food. Yes. But I wanted to mention, you shared with me that in my chart at some point I would be writing a book. I'm like, okay, I'll keep that in mind. And that, getting out and being more communicative through video, et cetera, was in my future as well. And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay.
And here we are.
Here we are 2 years later. Like, okay. So, and the other thing though, for me, medically speaking, that's the part that has been so powerful for me. Even before I met you, I had met a Jyotish astrologer, a Vedic astrologer in India. And he talked about things that happened to me 20 years ago, almost to the month or the day. And I'm like, how did he know that?
Yeah.
And the accuracy has been amazing, as well as anticipating what could be potential triggers for illness into the future. For me, I've had challenges with, tendon injuries, often tendon injuries of one sort or another, be it a partial rotator cuff tear, this and that, my knees. And I know I'm very active physically, but with these strategies that I've incorporated and being more present in my life, the injury toll on my body is virtually nil now.
That's
so
great.
With the stuff you've shared and my more awareness of being present has really helped me a great deal. So we only have a few more minutes, but let's talk a little bit, and we'll have to do another conversation, obviously, about the power of food in Ayurveda.
Sure.
Don't want to diminish that. It's very important. But it depends on your constitution, what's best for you.
Right. True. But there's also, I know we've talked a lot about khichdi,
right,
being such a grounding, nourishing, simple food where it's a combination of mung beans and rice. There's a lot of different recipes out there, but it's all about giving your system a break sometimes, so your system can actually process old things.
Right.
But also get the some simple nourishment that you need.
Right. Yeah. So there's so many aspects to what we've talked about today.
Yeah.
But was the whole point of what I was saying earlier. The beauty of Ayurveda offers so many tools for self-care and well-being that translates into the care of your family as well. It's not just about for yourself. And the stronger you are and the more resilient you are as a person, the more it's possible then to share your wisdom and knowledge with others in your own life. So in closing, if you need more information, I actually have a lot of Ayurvedic information, as well as a newsletter that has other valuable resources. Please go to drpentz.com. Also, the book talk that I mentioned, there will be a Zoom link. And to get that, you want to RSVP at bkwrks.com, which is their bookworks.com. So RSVP at bkwrks.com. Any last few words I'd like for people to know about your website and a little information there too.
Okay, well, thank you. My website is lexneon.com, LEXNEON. And you can find me on social media as well, on Facebook and on Instagram with Lex Neon Vedic Astrology.
Great.
So yeah, both of them, same.
Right. Awesome.
Thanks.
So I look forward to including you again, if that works.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Conversation here, and have welcomed sharing our thoughts and wisdom today.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
You're welcome. So thank you all for joining us today. We are taping this, and it will be available on Facebook as well as on my YouTube channel. And again, thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye.